Hello, my wonderful third graders. I hope you're having a fantastic day. We are in Domain 9, I believe. European Exploration of North America. This is Lesson 1, 1492, a year that changed the world. We have been studying our last domain. We studied the Native Americans, and now we're going to see how their world changes and the world of a lot of other people as Europeans come towards North America. Some vocabulary you will hear throughout the read aloud. Discovered is a verb, it's something that's done. Learned or found out something unexpected, found or saw something for the first time. Enterprise, a noun, a plan or project that is often risky or difficult to carry out. When the Pony Express riders set out to deliver mail 2,000 miles across the United States, it was a very dangerous enterprise. Exaggerated is a verb, made something seem larger or more important, overstated. Tom had a hard time convincing people he broke the school's long jump record because he had exaggerated his accomplishments in the past. A fleet is a group of ships, planes, trucks, or other vehicles that are controlled by a single person, company, or government. Propose is a verb to offer or suggest. The mayor said he would propose a new stoplight for the busiest intersection in town. A sphere is an object shaped like a ball. Sponsors are people who pay for the cost of an activity or event. Maybe you've had sponsors for your sports team. They probably have their business name on the back of your jerseys. Uncharted, unexplored, unknown. Although astronauts have visited the moon, most of space is still uncharted territory. So over the next few weeks, we'll be learning about European explorers who traveled to different parts of the Americas. So the Americas are over here. We have North America, South America, Central America, and the West Indies, all this area and over here, okay? So the West Indies are the groups of islands that separate the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. So these read-alouds are nonfiction. Nonfiction writing deals with facts about real people and real events. Even though most of the information you're going to hear really happened, we can't know for certainty that all of the historical accounts that we've passed down are completely accurate, right? Things are passed down orally or words get changed, so we don't know that they are absolutely perfectly correct. Some events, such as the search for the Fountain of Youth and the cities of gold, are described using language such as according to legend, or as some historians believe. Historians are still learning more about history as new discoveries continue to be made. Have you heard of Christopher Columbus? The illustration over there, the guy is Christopher Columbus. What do you know about him? Think about what you've learned. We're going to talk about him today. And then on the map, you see some different American civilizations. We have the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca that are all ancient civilizations found in the Americas. And you can see from the key on the map exactly where those areas were. So the Mayan cities are in the area of present-day Guatemala, Honduras, and southern Mexico. The Aztec were in central and southern Mexico, and the Inca were in the Andes Mountains of South America. Their capital is located in present-day Peru, down here. These vast empires existed for several hundreds of years, long before the Americas and areas of what we now call the United States were even inhabited by Europeans. Okay, so that's down more Central South America. We've talked about a lot about the Native American groups. Look at all these Native American groups. They didn't all exist at the same time. It's been over time that these different groups have existed. But there were so many of them, and there are still so many that are represented today. Okay? And a lot is going to change for the Native Americans as the Europeans start exploring and taking over the Americas. Most of it is not changing for the good. Do any of you know what important event in world history took place in the year 1492? It is said that in this year, the explorer Christopher Columbus discovered several islands off the coast of North and South America in what is now known as the Caribbean Sea. Here's a little rhyme that you can use to help you remember when Columbus set off on his important voyage. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Columbus and other Europeans had known nothing about these islands prior to his voyage. Sometimes people say that Columbus discovered the Americas, but did he truly discover something new? Is he the first person we've talked about that was in the Americas? Columbus was actually looking for a different part of the world. Does anyone know what land Columbus was trying to reach? Christopher Columbus was trying to sail to a part of Asia known at that time as the Indies. When Christopher Columbus and other Europeans at that time talked about the Indies, they were thinking about a part of the continent of Asia known today as India, as well as many surrounding islands. They went the wrong way to go to India. He wanted to sail to the area known as the Indies, which was right here. He's coming from Europe. Because he had heard and read that they were wealthy lands full of gold and spices. What Columbus actually ended up finding is an area now referred to as the Caribbean Islands, or the West Indies. Even though Columbus was sure he had reached part of Asia, we now call the East Indies. So he thought he was going over here. In reality, he ended up over here. The East Indies are the part of Asia that lay south of China and north of Australia. They include the present-day nations of India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines, as well as some other parts of Asia. So this area right over here. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, and cloves were grown in the East Indies. Then they were carried to other parts of the world by spice traders. The spice traders transported spices to Europe by going through the Middle East, so they traveled on land really far to get to Europe. So in this picture, you can see some gold and some spices, cloves, black pepper, cinnamon. Why do you think it was so important for Europeans to have spices? They were used for not only flavoring food, but also for medicine, special diets, and cleansings. And they were really hard to find. Over the course of the next few weeks, you will hear about the next phase of North American history, the colonial time period between the late 1500s and middle 1700s, when England began attempting to establish or set up colonies in the New World. At the time of the colonial settlement, the Americas were indeed a new world to the Europeans because they had no idea anyone was settled there. A colony is an area settled by a group of people from another country that remains connected to the newly settled area and its people. So the spices were carried overland from the East Indies through the Middle East to Europe this way. It was a long and dangerous journey for those spices. The traders had to load the spices onto pack animals like donkeys or camels and then lead these animals across deserts and mountains along dangerous roads where the traders might be robbed or killed. It took a lot of time and money to transport spices to Europe, and that meant that spices were very expensive. In the 1400s, Europeans were looking for a better way to get to the spice-producing lands known as the Spice Islands in the area they call the Indies. They figured if they could find a way to sail there, they could fill their ships with spices, sail home, sell the spices, and get rich. The possibility of getting rich, as well as becoming famous for finding new routes and discoveries, inspired a lot of people to take risks and explore uncharted land and water. Uncharted land and water are areas that have not been charted or mapped out yet. Christopher Columbus was only one of many men thinking about the Indies and the money that could be made if one could find a way to sail there. Columbus was born in the city of Genoa, Italy. In Italy, he was known as Cristoforo Colombo. As a young man, he had worked as a sailor and a map maker. He had sailed all around the Mediterranean Sea, along the northwestern coast of Africa, and as far north as England. Columbus had also read the reports of Marco Polo, an Italian merchant who had traveled to China almost 200 years earlier. Columbus knew that the earth was a sphere or shaped like a ball. Most educated men of his day knew this. However, there were lots of disagreements about how big the earth was. Most people thought the earth was pretty big, but a few skeptics thought it was not all that big. Columbus was one of the skeptics. He thought the earth was a lot smaller than most people thought, and that led him to propose his enterprise of the Indies. Everyone knew that the Indies were on the other side of the world, but Columbus thought that the earth was small, so the other side might not be far away. It might even be possible to get there by sailing around the world to the west. That was Christopher Columbus's bold idea that he proposed. Based on the context of the sentence, what do you think bold means? Bold, like different. It stands out, a different idea than everybody else. Unfortunately, there were two big problems for Christopher Columbus's idea. The first problem was that Columbus was wrong about the size of the earth. The earth is actually much larger than he thought, and that meant that the East Indies are much farther away from Europe than he realized. The second problem was that there's something besides ocean between Europe and Asia. There's a large block of land, the Americas. So you can see what he thought it was like, that he thought they were really close. He did not realize that the Americas were there. There was a bunch of land there blocking his way. So you can see from the key that the orange is what the Europeans thought the earth looked like, and the bluish clear part is what it actually looks like, actual land mass. Is Spain as close to the East Indies as Columbus thought? No. So here is an aerial view of the globe. You can see how far Europe actually is from the East Indies. The orange countries on the map, this is the map we just looked at, shows what they thought it looked like. And this is what it actually looks like. Columbus and other Europeans at the time didn't realize this large landmass existed to the west of Europe. Columbus convinced the King and Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, to be his sponsors, funding his voyage of sailing west to find the East Indies. Columbus set sail in August of 1492 with 3 ships. Do you remember the names of the ships in his fleet? The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Columbus sailed west for 5 weeks. After a while, the sailors started to get worried and scared about how far they had sailed. Nobody had ever sailed so far west from Europe. Then one day, a sailor sighted land. Columbus became excited. He thought he had reached Asia and the East Indies. In fact, he had landed on one of the islands in the Bahamas off the coast of North America. Based on the context of the sentence and looking at the image, what does the word fleet, what does fleet of ships mean? What does fleet mean? It's a group of ships commanded by usually one person or government. So we can see on this map Columbus's route from Spain down here. Stopped at the Canary Islands and then went over here and bumped into the Bahamas. It's like he went on a cruise. Columbus and his men explored the island. They staked a flag and claimed the island for the King and Queen of Spain. They made contact with the Native Americans who lived there. The Taino. Columbus called these people Indians because he thought he had sailed to an island in or near the East Indies. The native people Columbus met were peaceful and friendly. They traded with the Europeans. Columbus and his men gave the native people beads and bells. These items were considered cheap to Europeans, but the natives had long valued trade goods from distant places. In return, the native people gave the Spaniards food, fresh water, and colorful parrots. They each gave the other something that was plentiful on their continent but rare on the other. To stake a flag involves digging the pole into the ground so it stands upright. It's like you're claiming the land. A few of the natives had golden earrings or nose rings. Columbus and his men tried to find out where the gold came from. The Taino and the Spaniards made signs and gestures to communicate because they did not speak the same language. The Taino pointed to other islands. Long before Columbus arrived in the West Indies, trade occurred regularly between the people of the different islands. Their gestures were hard to understand, but the Spaniards thought the native people were saying that there were places not so far away where gold could be found. Columbus sailed off looking for islands of gold and spices. He visited several islands in the Caribbean Sea. On December 6, 1492, he began exploring a big island he decided to name La Isla Hispaniola, or the island of Spain, for the land from which he had sailed. 2 weeks later, on Christmas Day, the Santa Maria got stuck on a rock off the coast of Hispaniola. Columbus could not get the ship afloat, so he told his men to use the wood and supplies from the ship to build a fort on Hispaniola. 39 men volunteered to stay behind at the fort when the time came for Columbus to sail back to Spain and to report his findings to the king and queen. So you can see that they stopped at Hispaniola right here. It's now known as two separate islands, Haiti and the Dominican Republic. I'm sorry, two separate countries. It was one island, but now it's two separate countries, Haiti and the Dominican Republic. On his return voyage to Spain, Columbus took some of the native people on board as prisoners to show proof to the king and queen that he had really reached the Indies. On the way back across the Atlantic, Columbus wrote a report for the king and queen. He described having discovered and claimed several islands in honor of Spain. Once he arrived in Spain, Columbus presented Ferdinand and Isabella with the natives and shared many facts about the islands he had discovered. But Columbus also exaggerated. What does it mean to exaggerate something? You're telling more than the truth, right? You're making something seem bigger or better than it actually is. Why do you think he wanted to do this? He called the island of Hispaniola a miracle, describing it like heaven on earth. He said it had good harbors, rich soil, lots of spices, and rivers full of gold. Columbus boasted that the other islands he had visited were full of spices, but really he and his crew were unfamiliar with the exotic plants and trees that produce spices. Columbus more boldly exaggerated when it came to gold. He told the king and queen that Hispaniola was absolutely full of gold. He said there was gold in the rivers, gold in the fields, gold in vast mines, gold just waiting to be claimed. Columbus did not want to tell the king and queen only about the few natives wearing gold earrings and the few flakes in the rivers of Hispaniola that he believed were gold. Columbus reported all this in hopes of convincing the king and queen to sponsor another voyage to what he thought were the islands just off the coast of China. As you have heard, Columbus had read books by Marco Polo and other merchants that described China and the area known as the Indies as wealthy areas with flourishing trade. Columbus combined what he had read with what he had seen in the place he believed to be the East Indies and concluded that there had to be more riches waiting to be discovered. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella were so pleased by his findings that they decided to fund another voyage. He's not a very honest person, it seems like. I wonder what's going to happen next. What are the areas known today as the Americas? North America, Central America, South America, and the islands in the West Indies. What was the year that Columbus sailed to the islands in the West Indies? 1492. What was the area Columbus was trying to reach on his voyage? He was trying to get to the East Indies in Asia. Did Columbus realize that he had arrived at the islands of the West Indies, not the East Indies? No, he was convinced he had reached the East Indies in Asia. Why was it important for Columbus to find a new route to the East Indies? Spice traders in Europe transported spices by going through the Middle East on a long, dangerous journey. It took a lot of time to transport the spices through the Middle East, and that made buying spices expensive. Columbus wanted to find a new route to make trading spices and other Asian goods cheaper. He also wanted to get some money. What was Columbus's bold idea that he proposed? He knew that the Earth was a sphere or shaped like a ball, but he didn't think it was as big as most people thought. If the Earth was smaller, he could reach the other side of the world in a reasonable amount of time by sailing west rather than east from Europe. Was his proposed idea perfect? No. Why not? He was wrong about the size of the Earth, so the East Indies were farther away than he thought. He also didn't realize that there was a large amount of land in the ocean blocking his westward path from Europe to the East Indies. He didn't realize that the Americas were here. How did Columbus first interact with the natives he met on the island? They didn't speak the same language. What did they do? He called the people he made contact with Indians. The natives were friendly, and the Europeans traded with the Native Americans. And then how did they talk together? How did they communicate with each other? With gestures, because they did not speak the same language. So they did probably a lot of pointing and acting things out. It's probably a giant game of charades. What did Columbus think the natives were telling him? Columbus thought that the natives were telling him that there was gold located on their other islands. What did Columbus do to prepare for his return to Spain? He took some of the natives as prisoners in order to prove that he'd reached the East Indies. He was wrong, though. It was actually a different area, the West Indies. He wrote a report describing what he had found, including gold and spices, and described the islands he claimed in honor of Spain. Did his findings satisfy the king and queen? Yes, they decided to sponsor another voyage. They fell for his exaggerations and lies. How would you summarize the main ideas or important points of today's read aloud? I'll let you do that for yourself. Columbus described the island he saw as full of gold. Why do you think Columbus exaggerated his findings to the king and queen of Spain? He wanted to have them as future sponsors for another voyage. He wanted fame for his travels. He wanted to return to the area where he had landed and continue looking for gold and spices. Our word for today is proposed. In the read aloud you heard, Columbus thought the earth was a lot smaller than most people thought, and that led him to propose his enterprise of the Indies. Say the word propose. To propose something means to offer or suggest it. Scientists propose new theories when their old theories prove to be wrong. Is there a rule or practice at school, at home, or in a group you belong to that you would like to see changed? What kind of change would you propose? Why would you propose it? Be sure to use the word propose when you tell about it. All right, third graders, good job. excited to learn more about Christopher Columbus and other explorers.